It's the Criterion. It's the Criterion. Criterion. N. Project.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new installment of the Criterion Project. I am Conrado Falco, and with me is, as always, the wonderful Rachel Wagner. Rachel, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm surprised. I'm pushing through. It's a crazy time to be alive.
Yeah, we are recording as the coronavirus pandemic is wreaking havoc around the U.S. So
Yes.
we're all secluded in our apartments, in our households, and just a good time for podcasting, maybe.
Yeah. And we hope you're all safe and yeah, it's a good time to watch the Criterion channel.
Yeah,
Got
definitely.
caught up on all those things that you never have time to watch. Perfect.
You could, for example, listen to our very first episode about the movie Safe, about a woman who thinks she has a very terrifying disease. So maybe not for those who are really concerned about this virus, but seems topical in some way.
Yeah, if you're the type that finds that kind of thing therapeutic, then that's a perfect movie, really.
Yeah. Yes, you can also please subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to our back episodes. You can catch up with the movies we've been talking about. You can follow us at Criterion Pod on Twitter, and you can email us if you so want to at acriterionproject@gmail.com. Yeah, we're looking forward to receiving messages. And if we receive a message from you, how about this, Rachel? Do you think we'll read it on air next time?
I think
I feel we could do that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So yeah, it's been such a crazy time that I haven't watched anything else on the Criterion channel since our last meeting, but I will definitely have a lot more the next time we meet. That's for sure.
And I forgot to look that up, so let me see what I have seen, if anything. I definitely have a long list of things that I want to catch up with on the channel. Now, of course, my Wi-Fi is not working. So let's say that I didn't watch anything.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, it's been a wild time. So
it's been a wild time. It's been crazy. People have been having all kinds of stuff going on. Work's been canceled. Work's been shuffling around. But now perhaps is the time to sit down with some free time, not being able to go outside and watch some movies. So I will say something that I'm really looking forward to catching up with, that I've been trying to for a while, and I'm saying it now so that I actually do it, is I want to watch a Police Story and Police Story 2, starring Jackie Chan and also directed by Jackie Chan, both of which are available on the Criterion channel and are supposed to be some of the great martial arts movies from Hong Kong. So I definitely want to catch up with that.
That's a good
idea. Do you have anything like that, Rachel?
Well, I mean, I probably shouldn't even bring it up because it's not on the Criterion channel, but it seems so on brand. I think a great thing to watch during this time, if you're looking for something super binge-worthy that's really thoughtful and really great, is this would be the perfect time to watch the Up series. Have you ever heard of the Up series?
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you explain what it is?
So the Up series is, I forget what date they started, but in the 50s, they or 60s. Anyway, they started a group of 7-year-olds they found from all over London, and they tried to find people from all different classes. And so they had kids from an orphanage, they had kids from trade schools, from the aristocratic schools, all the different schools. And then every 7 years they come back and they see how, they follow up on these kids. And now they just had last year 63 Up, I actually saw it in January, and so they're at 63, and it is just incredible to see the ebb and flow of these people in their life, and to they say that the saying is a Mennonite saying of find a man at 7 and a boy at 7, you'll find the man that he is to become, and so it's sort of testing out that idea and if it's true, and it's amazing how true it is and how true it's not, and it's just Roger even said it was the greatest use of film ever, and it was ever and it's just you find yourself rooting for these people. It's just super binge worthy, and you kind of get your favorites, and so anyway, that's something that I think would be a great thing to watch in this sort of environment and situation.
Yeah, I think one of the first times I heard about it was around the time that Boyhood came out, and a lot of people were talking about how it was a similar project.
Right. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Whereas, obviously with Boyhood, it's every year that it gets the update. This every 7 years, but it's really moving. It's funny. And they do a good job of kind of updating you on the previous one. So you could just start at 63 up, but like it's a really cool experience just to watch the whole series. So
you're right. Great.
That's my random suggestion.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Definitely something that'll take a while. So that's good for a pandemic. Great. So now let's get into the meat of the essence. That's not a saying. I've been saying this. This is the second time I've said that phrase, and I don't know where I got it from because it makes no sense.
That's funny.
But anyway, let's just get into it.
Yes.
Hollywood Shuffle, directed by Robert Townsend, written by Robert Townsend and Keenan Ivory Wayans. Rachel, why don't you explain to us a little bit what this movie is?
Yeah, so this was made in 1987, released in 1987, and it's got Robert Townsend as this man who is trying to make it as an actor. He actually wants to be taken seriously, but the only roles that are given to him are these stereotypes and these you've got your playing your slaves and your hoodlums and your pimps, and these stereotypes of a black life, and so what he's trying to make a career for himself, he has these sort of fantasies that are sort of these little skits that are kind of making fun of these various stereotypes, and so that's kind of the idea behind the movie is sort of this. It's a satire of the black experience in Hollywood in the 1980s.
Yeah, I think that seems very concise and appropriate to describe the movie. The backstory, I think, of the movie is really interesting because it seems like it is highly autobiographical, right? Robert Townsend was an actor. He was in a couple of movies in the 70s, and he was stuck playing these roles of what you said, like gang members and pimps and whatever. Blaxploitation was kind of the thing back in the 70s for black actors. So this really feels like something in which he is criticizing the system and trying to showcase himself and his talents in many ways, right?
Right.
Through the movie, he it's an independent production. He financed it himself, and I think it's a really good looking movie for having been done on such a tight budget as it seems to have been.
Well, and not only is it a small budget, but literally he would kind of ask the people that were shooting in the various projects that he was in and said, "Hey, do you have any leftover film? Can I have your?" It was basically made on scraps of leftover film that he got from people that he was working with, which is kind of a whole different level
Yeah,
of.
it's a very it's a very cool story, and I think you can sense that sort of uh I guess urgency and excitement to be able to be making this movie while watching Hollywood Shuffle, I feel. I don't know
I
if you
think
agree
so.
with that.
I think so too, and it I don't know. It has a I don't know. It has an energy to it that you see in a lot of. It's just like sort of the. I was thinking about it with actually this movie Bad Hair that I saw at Sundance, and kind of the
Mm,
energy that movie had, and that movie's also a satire, and, and when you see that kind of, for lack of a better word, guerrilla filmmaking,
right.
it's exciting.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um,
And I think it was interesting to me how somewhat relevant. Like I feel like you could still make a lot of these jokes
yeah,
today.
definitely, definitely. What I thought was interesting was that in Roger Ebert's review of the movie, he closes by saying that some of the jokes in the movie and some of the roles presented in the movie are not really didn't feel relevant to him anymore. Like black actors are not asked to play these roles anymore, and I feel like in a weird way, I don't know if he was just being naive about it or not thinking hard enough, or that these roles have come back, right? I feel like maybe
Mm,
he was thinking about the part when they do like the slave skit when he's playing the runaway slave, and maybe that's something that in the 80s wasn't so in fashion. But this year we just got like Harriet Tubman nominated for the Oscar, and there's
right.
like a lot of slave narratives, 12 Years a Slave and things like that.
Sure.
And yeah, and I mentioned it because especially this year a lot of people were saying, oh, that's kind of very unfortunate that the only black person nominated for an Oscar this year seems to be
For
someone
playing a
who's playing a
slave.
slave, and everyone
Right.
who that's nominated is only playing slaves and playing maids and things like that.
Yeah. If you watch the movie Top Five with Chris
Oh,
Rock,
with Chris Rock, yeah.
he makes basically a
Hmm.
similar point about it.
Yeah,
That.
totally. And I think he's also made that point when he's actually hosted the Oscars a couple of
Hmm.
times, or similar points, right? So
Yeah.
definitely, I agree with you that it's very relevant.
Hmm.
Um, I would also say, um, for me, I think the thing that I really enjoyed about the movie the most were these sort of like skits and sketches and kind of digressions from the main plot. I don't
Hmm.
know if you'll agree with me. I think the main plot is it's kind of basic. It's just this guy who's
Yeah.
going on auditions and trying to get the role and whatever. And I think it is sort of like the flights of fancy and these like asides that really provide the very strong commentary and also the laughs. What would
Yeah.
you say about that?
Oh, I completely agree. And I think that's probably the way it should be. I mean, I don't think that we really need a a really um strong plot. Like it's fine. Like it to me, just to have something that's serviceable that weaves all of these pieces, these comedic bits together.
Hmm.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
overall, did you think it was funny?
I thought it was funny, and I was a little surprised to later read reviews and stuff from other people who think that it's very interesting and it's saying interesting stuff, but didn't think it was very funny. But I
Mm-hmm.
thought especially some of the sketches were really funny. I thought the
Yeah,
black acting school sketch at the beginning of the movie, I thought that
yeah.
was so good. And I don't know, then just things like when they do the Siskel and Ebert, maybe it goes on for a little too long, but I thought it was funny. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I laughed a lot while watching the
Yeah.
movie. What do you think?
I thought it was funny as well, and I do agree that some of the skits maybe go on a little too long, but it was fine. I was fine with that, and I felt a little bit, I don't know, un I feel a little awkward maybe, like even kind of commenting on it in a way because it's obviously not really made for my community. I'd be
Hmm.
interested to know what people, what African American, our after movie film goers what they think about it, and how they feel like it's held up. But from my perspective, I thought there were funny bits. They made me laugh throughout, and I thought that you really felt something for Townsend's character, and just I talked to a lot of actors as part of the Hallmarkies podcast, and just that grind is tough, and being a working actor, and it's towards the end when they're like the people are protesting him, like taking this gig, taking this job, and it's like that's a tough thing, because it's easy to criticize other people's choices when you're not out there doing the grind and trying to get the auditions and trying to like that's tough.
And I think something that I really loved about the movie as well is that the build up to that moment and to the ending in which it arrives, which I think you're putting your finger exactly on what's so complex about it, is the fact that we've seen this actor struggling for so long and trying to get the role, and being interviewed by the casting directors and directors who insist that he be more black, and that they want an Eddie Murphy type. That's another really funny part, I thought,
Yeah.
into the Eddie Murphy montage. But yeah, and then he comes to the end, he gets the role, he accepts the role, and then he is picketed for having taken a role that is not a good representation of black people. And yes, like you say, maybe we're not the biggest experts on the topic, and we shouldn't be speaking so much about the black experience in America. But I think he puts us in a very complicated position at the end, and the idea that, like, what is he supposed to do? And I don't think either side is necessarily right or wrong about it. I think more so that, in my opinion, is just an indictment of the system that has made it so that these kinds of things happen in this community. This kind of fights and protesting and.
Well, and just that we aren't more interested as a society in hearing interesting diverse stories, and so we leave people without a choice of what to do, and yet then we're judgmental of them taking that choice.
Yeah, exactly. And the worst part is that that I feel like it's also saying that, well, this is maybe something that it's up for debate. I would be interested in hearing what people think about this. But I think something that could be read in the movie, but could also not be read, is that the people who protest him are also black people, and that the system is pitting them against each other. That is something that I think is also interesting, and I wonder how if people think that it's thoroughly explored in the movie or not. I think
it's an interesting question. And again, I'm probably not the right person to answer this question, but like we even still have today, we have things like the Tyler Perry movies and the Medea movies and stuff like that are very successful, and people enjoy them. I've never seen any of them, but for that community, and yet are those sort of embracing the stereotypes, or reinforcing the stereotypes, or but then we're trying to do something different, but then it's a complicated question.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That seems almost like what the sequel could be, like Hollywood Shuffle 2, in which you have these movies that are for a black audience, that are indulgent in certain stereotypes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel to me like that's the next level, when black filmmakers and artists actually get to make their own movies and are criticized for it by their own community. Because definitely there's a lot of people out there who love the Medea movies, and also a lot of people who have been very critical of them.
Sure.
I saw there was a musical not too long ago here in New York called A Strange Loop that's about this guy it's a very meta musical, but this guy who's writing a musical, and there's a whole section in which he talks about the Medea movies and how his family loves them, and they have kind of like shaped their perception of what being black is, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the middle of the movie, you talked about that Eddie Murphy sequence, and he says, "I just want to be me, not Eddie Murphy." And you have that secretary casting lady who who basically is saying, like, you need to you're not laughing right, you're not that's not the way you're supposed to sound, that's not the way you're supposed to. And that to me is interesting, because sometimes it's like it kind of goes back to sort of maybe tokenism, that we'll have as a society, we'll have like, oh, that's the one that we're allowed to succeed, that's the person, and not that take any away from those trailblazers, but that's a tricky
it's hard
whole ball of wax too.
And it must be really hard to I remember listening to the story of Sammy Davis Jr. and I was thinking it must be so hard to be someone who has managed to be successful, but by being successful, you are both like doing a great thing for your community and also like, putting everyone else who wants to be like you in a box that they have to be like you, even though you're not doing it on purpose, So I think these are all the kinds of things that are going on in this movie that I think are very interesting and very, very relevant, like you said.
It's interesting. Have you ever seen the documentary, the "I'm Not Your Negro"?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Kind of made me think of that when he talks about Sidney Poitier.
Mm-hmm.
In that
Totally.
one.
Totally.
And that he was sort of the token that was okay to like. It was okay to like Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the thing that I think it was a podcast about Sammy Davis Jr. that I was listening to a couple of years ago, and talking about this whole thing of him, like, being photographed with Richard Nixon, and how, because he was one of the first black celebrities, and because of the time he came up in, he needed to fit in, in order to be successful. He needed to conform to all these things, and so his image had been tarnished in that black people thought that he was not activist enough, and he wasn't with them, and it was very interesting to see that and to think about those things.
And I think probably the one that if I was going to say one of the skits that I think you could make the outdated argument on, it was probably the film noir one.
Death of a Break Dancer.
Yeah, it was what was it, Jerry Curl versus Cookie Head?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I don't know, in the 80s how many of those kind of pulpy crime noir type stories were being made. Who knows? What do I know? But that one goes on. That one's the one that probably goes on too long. But
that one goes on for a while.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the same thing as you. And then I read a review by Ashley Clark, who's a great writer. I think he's a programmer at BAM here in New York. And he was writing about the movie, and he actually makes the argument that why that section is so long is so that we can get a glimpse at the kinds of roles that Robert Taylor is the name of the character, I think, wants to be playing. And even though it's kind of a skit, it's also like the most complex character in the movie, the detective that he's playing in there, kind of. And so I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it, because I also thought that it was running on for a little too long. But yeah, it made me think, like, yeah, this movie would not have gotten made, in black and white with black actors. I never heard of such a thing, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the first time we got something like that was when Denzel Washington came along in the 90s. So so it felt like something completely out of place in a weird way, but it was almost like he's imagining an alternative history for
right,
black
that he
actors.
could have been Humphrey Bogart or something like
that. Exactly. Totally, because he imagines himself as Superman and as Rambo, and and all the. That's another thing that I thought was really interesting commentaries when he sees the white actor who's playing the
Yeah.
Rambo type, and he says like, I only get to kill 38 people. I want to kill more people. I'm the hero, you know. I thought that was also really interesting.
Yeah. 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 That was when he comes into the, like, as a studio kind of setting where he sees like all the different
Hmm.
kind of things being filmed, and there's
Yeah,
just such like a longing look on his face that
yeah,
you really felt bad for him, that uh he just knows that not it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Um and I don't know, I like to, you see somebody like Mahershala Ali or somebody like that, and you think, oh, well, maybe we've, or Peter Nyong'o, people like that,
hmm,
that's like, maybe we've come a ways, maybe. I don't know,
hmm,
that someone like, I would like to think that Mahershala Ali would be considered for your King Lears and your superheroes and your and of course
hmm.
I thought of like Black Panther and some of these other things, and
Yeah.
you'd like to think, but I don't know if we've how far we've
I
come. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think we've definitely made some moves if it was up to me. But again, maybe we're not the people to speak on it.
Yeah.
I get the sense that we have definitely things have changed at least somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
I think yeah, there are a lot of movies being made by Black people, like, not just on screen but behind the camera as
Yeah.
well, which I think is also something that was really, really scarce back in the 80s. So I think in that
Yeah.
sense, we've come along, but we still have a long way to go. And maybe we can talk more about this when we do our remake proposals. But I think maybe there's other demographics that are still lacking behind, that don't have the representation that they should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's this, so that kind of culminates in this character that he's playing, that is, I don't know, how would you describe this character that he ends up playing? It's like, it's this weird, like,
Gangster type.
yeah, kind of like
He's
really,
kind of a feminine gangster, right? I think
yes.
that also brings me to one of the big, I think, things that hasn't aged very well about the movie. Probably the thing that has aged the worst about it is probably its kind of like representation of gay people and homosexuality and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. Um, yeah, I think that there's like a hairdresser character, I think, right? That is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much a stereotype, and then I think in the Jerry curl sequence in the film noir, there's a couple jokes like that, and then at the end he's playing this sort of like gang leader who's the villain in the movie, but is also kind of very effeminate, which is, I think that part of it is kind of appropriate for the 80s. I feel like back then we had a lot of effeminate villains because of the place we were in as a society, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it also shows that how things evolve, and even a movie that is purposely about avoiding Black stereotypes and fighting
Yeah.
against them has stereotypes of its own.
Yeah, we actually had a comment from Alonso Duralde, my friend. He said, it is a movie that brilliantly blasts stereotyping in movies and features a single LGBT character who is, say it with me, a stereotype. But it
Right.
is the exception to the showbiz rule that satire is what closes Saturday night. This is what he said. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very appropriate way to put it.
Mhm. And so, yeah, it's then he sees his little brother, who's just very disappointed that he's playing this role, being this
Hmm.
person, and he feels really sad, and he says, this is not the kind of acting I wanted to do. And uh, and then you see that he ends up doing this postal worker ad for the post office.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that ending. What I thought that ending was so oof. Like I thought it was gonna be kind of a happy ending, but then at the end, when he looks at the camera and he says, "If you can't take pride in your job, remember there's always the post office." And I was like, "This is kind of dark. This is kind of like
Yeah.
very, it's not as optimistic as and I guess, maybe he shouldn't have been optimistic. I think it feels very real to me, the
Yeah,
conclusion that he draws.
I think so. I think that, I mean, there's a wink to it, but
Hmm.
it is a bit of a cynical ending, I would say, but not without. I mean, there's a cynical side to satire, and
Hmm.
not without. I think some due cause.
Yeah, and I think it's for the most part. I think I tend to like when satire ends in kind of in a question mark rather than a
Yeah,
period. I think it's more interesting, and I think it opens up for a interesting discussion because I've been thinking about that ending. Thinking about what we've been talking about, right? Like, what is he supposed to do? What can you do about this? Like, then you just don't work, and um, I don't know. And like, what is being honorable? What is having a good job? What is um, the many ways, I guess, in which we get to sell our souls in order to make a living, which is
yeah,
you know
it's tricky.
complicated stuff.
It's
Yeah.
a tricky question. We had one other comment. Scott Johnson, he says, it's a very funny movie, though rather unstructured, and the ending is kind of off. Though it's got lots of memorable scenes, particularly one of John Witherspoon babbling about hoe cakes.
Oh, when the Winky Dinky Dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, I
probably
don't
went to
know.
the Winky Dinky Dog well one too many times, I think, but it was
Mm,
still, it's an interesting thing because it's always easier for other people to to think they know how you should live your life.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah. The other thing that I would say is probably amongst its weaknesses, there's a representation of LGBT people. I also think the female characters are not super well developed. I
yeah,
don't
that's
think,
fair.
which seems kind of like seems also like a thing of its time. The 80s in mainstream Hollywood weren't the best time for female characters, I would say.
I did think that the girlfriend, it was kind of funny though when she says, "I've thought about it and I have come to the conclusion I'm going to kill him."
Yeah,
That made me laugh.
that section is so funny.
That was
And the
pretty good.
grandma who says she's gonna write her book called Bobby Dearest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. And so overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was
Me
funny, and
too.
that's the most important part of a
Yeah. Of a comedy.
yeah. So
100%. I thought it was very funny. All
yeah.
right. Let's get into our questions,
Yes.
Ria. So the first question is, what makes this a Criterion film? And I guess we should say that this is technically not part of the Criterion collection, but it is available in the Criterion channel. So
Right.
maybe we can restructure that phrase into, do you think this should, like,
Do you
could you
think it
make an
should
argument
be?
for this to be in the Criterion collection, to be released on DVD?
I think so. I feel like it's. I mean, it has that sort of guerrilla filmmaking, which I think feels kind of Criterion to me. But then also, just I think that the the Criterion collection should be a portfolio of a gallery of the different experiences on film, different cultural
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and this is it. For uh, this is very emblematic, and I think our Criterion also loves movies about movie making, and here you've got that involved with here as well. So I think there's certainly an art case to be made for sure.
I think so as well. I think historically speaking, there's I can think of a movie that feels like so much of a relevant time capsule.
Yeah,
Even if that might feel like a contradiction, I just think it's like, and the story behind it, the idea of an independent production, and the fact that it looks so great despite it being shot on such a low budget,
yeah,
and like you said, shot on scraps, kind of. um, I think there's a lot to appreciate in this movie, and I think the Criterion Collection would benefit from more comedies and
yeah,
more diverse kinds of movies, not just in the cast and the people who make the movies, but also in the genres, in the type of
yeah,
movies that are made. Like this, which our commenter mentions that it's kind of unstructured, which I think could be seen by some people as a flaw, but it could also be seen as like an alternative to the norm, which I think is what the
Right.
movie is trying to go for.
I
So
agree.
it makes it feel so special.
Yeah. And so where do you think it ranks on our pretentiousness scale?
That's a great question.
It's a hard question a little bit on this
I
one.
think at its heart, the movie wants to be, uh, I guess, for the people, for the lack of a
Yeah.
better word, right? It wants to be a mainstream movie, even though it's an independent film. It wants to be. It's designed to be funny. It's designed to connect with an audience, and I think that makes it rank. It's not very pretentious. There's, I guess, a layer of pretension in the kinds of topics that it wants to talk about, and the meta element of it. But I would still put it like at a 2 or a 3, maybe.
Yeah. Same with me. And one movie I did think of while I was watching this is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Mm.
just with all the skits and the.
Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, because that movie is also kind of a goes off in different tangents, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a great way
Yeah.
to look at it. Yeah, it's definitely kind of a hangout movie, this one, right? It
Mm-hmm.
feels like something you can put in and relax, and just like
Yeah.
every now and then there's going to be this crazy funny sketch.
Right. And
Yeah.
you don't have all the exorbitant driving. What's what I have in Hollywood. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think it's pretentious really at all. I think yeah, there's a little bit of meta-ness, I guess, but I think
Mhm.
it's pretty approachable.
Yeah, it's very accessible. I would recommend everyone who's interested to watch it, because I think they'll have a good time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about our remakes. So I'm actually kind of excited about mine.
Oh, okay.
So what I would do
Mhm.
is I would get Mr. Jordan Peele in behind the camera,
Mhm.
and I would what I would do is make a little bit more of a horror slant on it, but it would still be satire, kind of like Get Out did. But every time so you have this actor, and every time that he accepts one of these roles, these
Mhm.
stereotype roles, that character comes to life for real and begins to
Ah.
actually like haunt him. And so then he has all of these cliches and stereotypes basically haunting him. And so he's got like a gangster and a slave and he's still trying to. Nobody will believe him, and things get sort of crazier and more madcap. And I think it could be funny. It could be very pointed. Like you could have kind of a Green Book type of sort of uh, joke, I guess, kind of about it too, or like, and I think it would be, you could make it kind of scary, but it could have sort of that feel of Sorry to Bother You, but also Get Out, and kind of, I think it could be fun.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds very interesting. Um, my my proposal is, we're living in the age of Marvel Cinematic Universe and
Yeah.
franchises. So my pitch is to make Hollywood Shuffle into a franchise in which every entry focuses on a different underserved demographic in Hollywood. So we can start with, like, the Latino version, and you can get like Michael Pena to be the main character, and then you can have the Native American version with, I don't know, maybe like Adam Beach or like
Mm-hmm.
Gil Birmingham or something. You get the Asian American version with like Aquafina or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you just keep going, and you just make a huge saga in which finally culminates with the Avengers of the Hollywood Shuffle, in which all the actors from all these different backgrounds come together to take on like a
Yeah.
evil Hollywood studio or something.
Yeah. It'd be like the Eternals, but
Yeah,
Hollywood Shuffle.
exactly.
It's very exciting. Yeah. Hey, there you go. Uh, so let us know what you would do if you were going to remake Hollywood Shuffle, and let us know your thoughts. What do you think about this film? Do you feel like it's held up, or maybe it's a creature of its time? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you.
And so next time, we are going to be getting our music caps on, and we're going to be talking about the Beatles and A Hard Day's Night. And so that was one of the probably one of the most iconic sort of rock band films ever released, and it just seemed like something that would be kind of a fun release and a fun thing to talk about for our next episode.
Absolutely. We'll talk about our favorite Beatles, our favorite Beatles songs.
Yeah.
And will we be singing? I don't know. You gotta tune in to find out.
Yes.
Will we be doing Liverpoolian accents?
Nobody will ever listen again if I do that. Well, very good. This was a lot of fun to talk about, and so I, like I said earlier off air, we've had a pretty good run. I feel like of movies that the two of us have both enjoyed, so that's always nice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe next time we should be fighting. Maybe I will come with my knives out.
Yeah. How dare you?
All right. Well, remember to follow us. We're on Twitter, Criterion Pod. You can follow me on Twitter at Coco Hits New York. And Rachel, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. You can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. And also follow the Hallmarkies podcast. We're going to be continuing. I'm kind of lucky because my content isn't as tied to new releases as a lot of my friends' content is, and so I should be continuing to roll along. And I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
All right. Well, see you guys next time.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.